Who is Dundermoose? That is so stupid. I did that for you, Jeffro. There's my intro. But for those of you that didn't just log off, welcome back to This is Dundermoose. I am your host. This is Dundermoose, and with me tonight is Brigadine, the one and only Dracon Invictus, and I'm really excited for this show. I have played with this man. I have played Intralopulus with this man, and he is probably the reason why I kept playing Intralopulus after I first hit some of the turbulence that comes with that recalibration from being programmed for playing a different way and trying a new one. So, with that introduction, Brigadine, do you want to tell us how you got started in this hobby and what is it that most impacted the way that you play it now?
My best friend in the world, his family were military,
Okay.
and his dad played AD&D, when he was deployed, and so he played with his sons, and they moved in, and we kind of moved into the same neighborhood when I was very young. Um, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and
Wow.
that's where
Okay.
I was introduced to AD&D. Played all through childhood and
So you
pretty much my
started with
entire life.
advanced. You didn't start with basic or any of those other editions.
I didn't know anything. I didn't even know there was basic or OD&D or anything like that until the last probably 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, in my mind, AD&D was the OG, um, and we played through second edition and third edition, and we dabbled a little bit in fourth edition, on
Hmm.
up through fifth edition. Played a lot of fifth edition in the recent years. Um, my transition happened through B Dubs, who I've known for a while,
Okay.
and he sent me his patron play blog post about how everybody's playing D&D wrong, and there's a better way to do it, and we're going to drag you kicking and screaming into how to do this thing. At first,
All
it
right.
kind
So
of made me angry.
had you been playing with him before, or you were just buds and then
Yeah,
started picking up his what he was putting down?
I've played with him before, and um, we had played more like conventional style games,
Hmm.
and we weren't really satisfied with them, and I don't think either of us really could pinpoint why. Um, and then we didn't really play together for a while, and then he came back with all these new ideas and these new revelations, and talking about winning it at RPGs and whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and that was a different take that uh, it, you know there was some turbulence there. There was a little bit of a headbutt there
Okay,
with.
so let's talk about that because it sounds like you guys are both having the same frustration with conventional play, but you couldn't quite put your finger on what it was that was bugging you.
Right, yeah, it just wasn't, it wasn't fulfilling, particularly in any session where it felt like you had to hit a mark. um,
Hmm.
those were kind of hard to get through, and so I witnessed some gaming groups kind of fall apart a little bit. Some campaigns struggled. The joke about the 6 session campaign is a reality.
Yeah.
It comes from reality when DMs burn out by trying to script a game, and they die on that hill,
Yeah.
literally, and the whole
Th-
thing goes away.
would you say that is like the key friction that causes the dissatisfaction is like the DM feels like they need to prep so much and then they write out a 3 act structure and then the players, if they want to express autonomy, they bump into that, and he's got to either artfully find a way to make weave their decisions into still getting them where he wants them to go, or kind of just offer them dead ends until they find the right one. And like so, it's wearing on the players because they don't really feel the autonomy anymore. They're just either have a choice of either just going along to get along or becoming like a little baby bird in a nest, just opening your beak and waiting for the DM to drop the next plot point in. And then the DM is doing all this extra prep, and it's not it's not just not only being not appreciated, but it's like being resisted, right?
Well,
Maybe I'm projecting a bit. Is that is that your experience?
it's the wrong kind of prep. I'm
Yeah.
not a zero prep guy. I actually run my sessions that way when I DM because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
But I'm not a zealot on the zero prep train. I think
Okay.
there are some things that should be prepared. I think you should know the terrain a little bit. I think you should know um, at least the large town in the area. You know, you should know a little bit about the territory. You don't have to do the whole thing. Um, but the guys who burn out are trying to script. They're literally trying to script. Okay, the guys are going to go to the dungeon in the first part of the session, and then they're going to find this artifact in the second part of the session,
Yeah.
and they're going to use the artifact to do the thing on the third part of the session. And then when the players go, you know what, we're going to go rob the lord in the town,
Yeah.
that DM has only prepped a very narrow path, and
Yeah.
you can't play a game like that and it be fulfilling for everyone involved. My particular pain points were um, when you felt like you had to hit a mark as a player, when it becomes Mother May I
Hmm.
gaming, where it's okay. Well, I have to guess what the DM wants me to do in this situation. Um, I have a severe problem with that, and then the more that happens, the more belligerent I get, and then the game kind of goes a little crazy. I'll force a change just to make something happen because it's not any fun to
Yeah.
to beg the DM to make the thing go.
Well, like you've already written the outline, and so you're bored because you know everything's going to happen, and you're frustrated that it's not happening quicker. And like your players are just bumbling around trying to find the next bullet point, right?
Right?
So,
Yeah,
but so this was subconscious. This was internal frustration. Um. So was it B Dubs that first challenged the way you understood D and D?
absolutely. So we were talking about it, and he's like I said, he came with these ideas, and I was like, man, I don't know, man. You can't tell me I've been playing D&D wrong. I've been playing for 30 years. Fuck you. How about that?
Yeah.
And
So
then I slept on it, and
well,
then I
before we get to the processing though, I just do
sure.
want to acknowledge that you are not the only one that has that initial response,
Well, I,
right?
I think it's a natural response for men in general when challenged is
Okay.
is anger or defensiveness. I think it's if you're going to step to me, then okay, fuck you, and you get ready to throw down a little bit,
Hmm.
particularly something that you're passionate about. The more
Yeah.
passion you have for something, the harder it's going to be for you to kind of take a step back and think about it logically. So if you can get past that point, then that's where you can really make a rational decision.
All right. This is going to be a weird analogy, but I can remember like my first real girlfriend. Like I had girlfriends in high school, but I remember the first one that I really felt um infatuated with. And my dad was trying to help me understand what was going on, and he said he gave me a dime, and he's like, I want you to hold this dime right up in front of your eye. And so I held it up in front of my eye, and he's like, you can't see the rest of the world in focus because the dime is too close to your eye, but you can't even see that dime in focus because it's you're holding it too close. And he's like, that's how you're acting with this girl. Is you don't have a proper understanding of anything around the rest of your life, and you don't even understand this relationship because you're so close to it. And I feel like maybe I'm oversharing with that story, but I felt like that was profound and wise, and that may explain some of the reaction you're talking about how when men get challenged about something they're passionate about, um, that it's hard to see it in perspective, and so you get defensive.
Well, sure, yeah. And what is 38 special? Hold on loosely.
Yeah,
Um, you gotta be able to examine what you're doing, and you've got to be able to step back from it and go, okay, let me diagnose what might be going weird here and figure out something different.
yeah.
Um, and that's kind of where the conversation went.
So did you let him have it, or did you just kind of seethe on it for a bit?
Yeah, I fucked him up a little bit. He's a good friend of mine. It wasn't too crazy, but there was a little bit of back and forth, like, who do you think you are, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then,
Well, I
like I
mean, it's
said,
happening right now. So here's the curator saying, "So you're saying a GM shouldn't be passionate about the game they run?"
yeah.
Um,
So, but what was interesting is, okay, so this is a good friend of mine. He's
mhm.
a bro. It's a guy I respect. He's telling me something that he thinks is important enough to share.
Yeah,
Okay, so I sleep on it. I come back, I reread the post, I think about it, and we start talking in a different tone, and it's less defensive, and it's more um, inquisitive. And okay, well, what is it about this that is so special? Why do you think it's so good? And
yeah,
you know, and a lot of the we talked a lot about the rhetoric and the spin that guys like Jeffro and B Dubs and Mollison, Streisand, these guys use to push this thing into your brain, and they
yeah,
use this very strong language, and they get in your face about it, and it's a bit of a test to kind of weed out people who aren't going to engage in good faith. They're going to get upset, and they're going to they're going to accuse and argue and ankle bite,
yeah.
and I feel like that's part of the reason why they frame it the way they do when they're talking about it. And once you can get past that point, you can have a real conversation. And when you can have a real conversation, you start to learn all the value.
Right on. But there's the reason I think your story is so interesting to me is because I feel like online we come up against people that are in that spot that you were in before you went to bed, and they never get past it. They're just like, I block BROSR on site. I'm
Well,
just gonna block them, and I'm not gonna learn. I'm not gonna lean into it. And like, I think maybe it's just because you had so much respect for the person that it was coming from that helped you get around the corner.
it's about community. Um, it's about camaraderie. It's about mutual respect, like you say. I think Jeff Rose run into this a little bit with his ankle biters on Twitter,
Yeah,
uh, because anytime he mentions his book, that's, hey, listen, I've done a lot of research on this. I've played the games. I can show you what I mean. He's even given them away for free.
yeah,
Um, and these guys still lose their minds, and they call him a grifter, and they call, oh, you're just trying to sell your book, and all this other insanity. And it's like, if you can't trust that the person that you're talking to has your best interest at heart, then why are you talking to them? Fuck them. Move on.
yeah, yeah. It's like how much is it on you to overcome their cognitive dissonance?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you found this out a little bit because you're a really nice guy. Um,
Well, thank you.
and when you get people that engage with you, but they don't engage with you in good faith,
Yeah,
they're looking to tell you that you're wrong, but they're not looking to try to understand your side or your point of view. Um, when those people pop up, it's difficult to find your line and find the energy to convince somebody. Um, Bless Jeffro's heart, he's got the energy to argue with these idiots all day, every day. I couldn't do it,
it
you
only
know?
gives him more strength.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know how he does it. I can't do it. So that's why I try to stay in the background a little bit. I'm not the upfront rhetoric guy. I
Yeah.
don't get into the conversations like the front facing guys do.
And as the peacemaker, like I feel like sometimes our friend or foe gets a little too hair trigger just because we people have dealt, and I don't have as much experience dealing with those bad faith actors where they will just punish your every attempt. Um I did come across a couple quotes. That's why I was digging in my bag while you were talking there. There's a book called Principles by Ray Dalio, and I haven't read it, so I can't recommend it. But I found a couple quotes from it. One of them was, "Stop wanting to be right and instead want the truth." and the other one was don't let ego stand in the way of learning. And I feel like for a lot of people, because D&D is not just a hobby, because it is somehow become part of their identity, that if somebody has a different way, it's not taken as, oh, I'm interested to try that. I'm confident enough to learn it and see for myself whether it's better or not, with the knowledge that if it's not, I can take what I like and keep going. Or they just see it as an affront to, well, your whole identity is a lie because you have been playing wrong for 40 years or whatever. And so then they've got to defend their sunk cost fallacy, right? Where it's like, well, I can't be open to someone who says that a different way is better or real, because then I have to admit that I've been playing in a suboptimal way. And
Well,
that's not,
how many times have we seen the comment or the rebuttal or the ankle bite, um, that, well, they say some interesting things, but I don't like how they say it.
hmm,
And it comes back to that first test.
yeah,
If you can get past that first test and truly show some inquisitiveness, and really try to understand and say, listen, let me at least get an idea of what they mean, then yeah,
yeah.
that's
Bob might
another
be onto
thing that,
something there too.
yeah.
For those listening while you're driving or whatever, Bob Stevens wrote, "I can't sell my BS product if the BROSR is correct." So there may be a
um,
financial motivator as well.
Maybe, and I don't know. Like I said, I stay in the background because I don't want to get into arguments with people. I'm a doer. I'm not really much of a talker about that kind of stuff. If you're not interested, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
If you want to learn, I'll be happy to talk to you, and I'll be happy to show you, and I'll be happy to guide you,
Hmm.
into the next stage of the game.
So it's more like the Marines than say evangelism. You're not looking to convince the masses. You're just saying we're looking for a few good men, right? Or a few
I
good
am
bros.
definitely not. I couldn't possibly give a shit less what you do at your gaming table. Doesn't matter to me at all.
Right
Um,
on.
what I
Hands
can
over,
do
Eddie.
is I can show my receipts. I've got 60 sessions of my own campaign. I've got however many sessions in Dubs are on that I played and DM'd. Trollopolis, Riff Bros, Sojanka. I've been around in a couple different games, and um, I can say from experience that the way that we play works, even when the
Yeah.
system is broken and stupid like Riffs.
So that's another thing I want to point out is like when it comes to experience, like hour for hour, I don't know if anyone has as much Bro SR play as you do. Because when I started this channel, I would like people would decide to come in. I'd get them to come on and be a guest, and then they'd be like, "Well, okay, well, come into my Discord." And every time I came to a Discord, like there you are already going, "Oh, hey, look, here's Thunder Moose," So, so obviously you got over whatever hangups you had that first night. You gave it a shot, and here's the thing about the Bro SR that fascinates me: you were not alone in that. When you tried it with an open mind, you enjoyed it to the degree that you were not only willing to play in multiple campaigns, but when you wanted to run your own game, you were like, these are the principles that I'm going to use for my game.
Right, and what stood out to me in when I was first having the conversations and kind of looking around and familiarizing myself with uh, the, the the games that were in play, everyone made it very clear that you had to have receipts.
Hmm.
Nobody gave a shit if you sat around and talked about what you thought a good game might be one day if you ever got a chance to run it.
Or
You had
especially if you
to.
said, no, nobody could ever do that without having played it. And you're talking to the people that have this week
Right.
done that, right?
Exactly. And so what that said to me is, okay, these guys they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they can prove that it's working for them.
Hmm.
And then I started playing it myself, and I said, okay, I want to use this in my home game. And
Your first experience was at Dubzerone?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
I started as a patron in Dubseron, um, and then it kind of branched out from there.
All right.
But the big thing for me was play reports and being able to show receipts and being able to show evidence. It's a test and prove situation. And if you can read the play reports, it's not so much about what the players do. Um, because there's only so many different times you can read that the guys went into dungeon and they killed the thing and they got the loot and they came back out.
Yeah.
The mechanics of how they got there is where the value is in the play reports. It's hey, this thing happened in downtime, and downtime exists because we follow a fixed timeline.
That's right.
Those kinds of things where you start to really see how those gears fit together and create a more interesting world
Yeah.
beyond um, beyond just, hey, we're going to stop here in the fifth room of the dungeon and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks, maybe, or maybe a month or whatever. um, and that static world like that isn't, once you've experienced something different, it's just not something you want to go back to.
Yeah, being able to read. Okay, when you're going overland and you roll that there's an encounter, the first thing you check is surprise, and then you check distance, and then you roll initiative, and showing people here's how this goes, and here's how it's different than what you've seen before. Also, the cognitive load on a DM when you pause in the middle of a dungeon, knowing full well that you're not going to see these people for 2 weeks, and then expect him to remember the exact game state, even if not everybody can make it to the next session or whatever. There's a lot on the DM to remember, to keep going, and to kind of hand wave away. You got players teleporting in and out of the dungeon because of who's there or not. I just feel like conventional play is rough on DMs, and that these other types of play where you're using more constraints, you may think, well, 1-to-1 time sounds heinous, but it's really freeing, and it's a pretty simple, easy thing when you get down to it, and it
I
takes a
had
lot of that load off.
I actually joined a conventional campaign not too long ago, a couple months ago,
Okay.
and I had to bow out of it because my brain doesn't work that way anymore. I
Yeah.
can't. I just can't. I can't pause in a dungeon. I can't. It doesn't feel. Um, it doesn't feel tactile enough to me. It doesn't feel like
It's
I'm.
not as fascinating.
Right. There's the opportunities isn't there for the game to continue to move. I would challenge your assertion that the stop time DM is more taxed than the 1-1 time DM.
Okay.
In only that it's a different level of taxation. The stop time DM, all his cognitive load is up front.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times those guys are half using the rules anyway. They're
Yeah.
not following encumbrance or light sources or things
Well,
like
but
that.
as long as we're having fun,
Well, and I like I said,
that's
when I started
that's
this thing,
all it's
I'm not
about.
trying to
I'm just kidding. I'm being the devil's advocate.
I'm not trying to beat anybody up. I just want to try to shine a light on why we say that you're playing D&D wrong.
Hmm.
If somebody took a rook in chess and moved it diagonally across the board, you're playing chess wrong. If somebody, when they put the money in the middle of the board in Monopoly for, free parking and get out of jail and all that, you're playing Monopoly wrong.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean you're not having a good time, and that doesn't mean you're not allowed to do it at your own table. Just don't tell me you're playing Monopoly. Don't tell me you're playing chess. You're playing some made up shit that don't make any sense, and you do whatever you do, and that's cool for you. But if you're playing a game, you got to follow encumbrance. You got to track your light. You got to track your rest turns. You got to track your travel rates, your random encounters. All this stuff is the game.
Yeah.
And if you cut that stuff out, oh, I'm going to cut out random encounters because I think they're boring and they just get away from what I scripted. And that kind of stuff is silly. And
Yeah.
but they apply it to D&D because of Rule 0, where they think that it's somehow valid. And unfortunately, it just isn't. The game's just not the same. So you just can't play that way and call it D&D
And
or
I'd say,
Axe or whatever game you're playing. Play by
yeah.
the rules in the book that you're playing.
And when the DM does do things that give them too much power in the game over the rules, I have come to the point as well where that lowers my fascination with the game I'm playing, right? Like if you are playing with a guy and he gets hit with a disintegration ray, for example, and his character just goes to absolute ash, um, and then the DM says, "Well, because you communed with your deity before you went into battle, you come back with full hit points," and you hear him roaring in the background, and it's because it's got that mono party focus where it's like Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, where there's just like a small cast of characters that the entire universe is about them, and that DM is doing it to preserve the fun for the player who just had a bad roll and got disintegrated. Um, but it takes the air out of the balloon as far as the danger and being an elite player and figuring out how the game works as a player so that you can not only play it to its best but show others, you can win at D&D.
If you're not, if there's no risk, then you're not playing a game. If
Yeah.
there's no risk of losing, then there's no contest. If there's no contest, then you aren't playing the game in the way that we know it. You're playing you're it's interactive theater. It's a choose your own adventure book um, kind of thing where that's just not the way to play. It just isn't.
Yeah.
And anybody
So
who's tried it knows it.
So,
And
but okay,
you
so
know,
the people that are getting defensive because they're saying, "Well, you think you play better than us," and at the beginning, we want them to set that aside and just learn what we're actually offering. But there is a degree, I feel like those who have played in this other style, you can't be satisfied going back, and so I think there is a way that we absolutely have experienced that we have a better style of play than at least what we did when we did it that way.
it comes down to the objective of why you're playing the game.
Yeah.
Alexander Macris has a really good um, analogy that he uses. I don't know if that's the right word, but he equates tabletop role playing game to team sports.
Yeah.
And the people who view it like a team sport are your consistent players. They show up, they put the energy into the session to be successful, whatever that means for the session. The people who view it as a social gathering show up late, they miss sessions,
Yeah.
they're not engaged during the session, they're on their phone or they're chit chatting about life, day to day stuff, that kind of thing. Um, there's nothing wrong with hanging out with your homies. And
Mhm.
if in during that time you guys throw some dice and kill a goblin or whatever, okay, fine. But if you're sitting down to play the game of D&D or play the game of Axe or play the game of fill in the blank,
Yeah.
there's an expectation that we're going to achieve whatever the objective is that the game sets forth in front of us. Uh, Generally, that's to gain experience and gain treasure and gain power and
Yeah.
develop the world around you. And that's why we're all into this thing. Nobody listening to this doesn't know what the objective of D&D is. So I don't know that we need to belabor that point.
Yeah. Well, but there are some points. We're on the topic that I wanted to talk about tonight, and that I think you were uniquely positioned to address. We've both talked, and I've talked to B Dubs about this too, in months past, about how there's a lot of advice on how to be an elite DM, but it doesn't necessarily work if you don't have elite players. And I feel like you are, if not the best, one of the best. I think you're the best player I've ever played with. I remember my first time in Jeffro's space section of Trolopulus. My first monk character, he's a shotgun monk on a spaceship, and he's blue. And I just wanted to charge out and have fun. And you immediately grabbed me by the collar and were like, "I will not let him charge off into the jungle." And then you started putting us in order. You're like, "The monk goes in the middle. Let's get a front rank." And I immediately realized, oh, this is a much more serious game than what I thought. This guy's probably seen some stuff. He's probably watched some other characters die, maybe lost a few PCs of his own. So how did you develop the instincts that you have for being a good player?
Well, first thing I think it can be a little misconstrued about what a good player means.
Okay.
I'm not as worried about tactical stuff like that, and I'll give you an example. I'm pretty good in tactical situations in games. I've played for a long time. I played a lot of video games. I played a lot of D&D and D&D like games.
Mm-hmm.
When we joined the Rift Bros game, about half of the player base there are veterans of various military services, and they
Okay.
have an extremely different skill set and an extremely different knowledge base than I do. I'm not a veteran. I've never served. I don't, I don't have that knowledge base, and I quickly learned about how little I know about some types of tactics, particularly modern warfare tactics.
Okay.
Um, the I don't really focus on the tactical part of D&D as what makes us good.
All right.
I think it's more about the dynamic of the table and the hierarchy at the table and the um, I think you said Victor Gorchev said something about alignment language of
Yes.
the people at the table, where when everybody's on the same page and they can look to the same objective and understand that they're playing the same type of game, that's
Mm-hmm.
what's more important to be successful than individual tactic, beating the creature by using the right spell at the right time or setting up the right front line, that kind of stuff. You'll learn that. And even if you're
Yeah.
brand new to the game, you'll fall into that. Yeah, you'll make some mistakes and you'll die or whatever. That stuff's not that complicated. It's what's I guess what makes me most interested in the game is the different dynamics between the different groups of players and the different DMs, and how that expresses itself in a way that uh, that is truly unique at every table. It's never the same.
So I got to mention this comment. Jeff Rose says, "Is doucheland in your alignment language or not?" That is a perfect example because um, it started with a spelling error. I couldn't remember how to spell douche, and some of my spellings looked like Deutsch, and so you just made a pun. You grabbed a gif from, what was it, the Weimar Republic or something. You just did a doucheland instead of Deutschlandia, and did them. And then there was one person that had joined the group that did not speak the alignment language, and I think you get the blame for his eventual downfall because of that. I'm not sure. I think we all share.
Hey, I'll wear it, I guess, but like
I
we
was
were talking
definitely
about
subverting
before,
his trust in the group with my shenanigans as foeman.
that dude wasn't going to make it,
Yeah,
and it was really an alignment language situation. He was never going to make it, and that just happened to be the straw. But if it wasn't that, it'd be something else. And it's a throwaway. You type in the GIF bar when you're searching for a GIF. I
yeah.
typed in Deutschland, and I got some soldiers marching.
A black and white soldiers marching.
He took that to mean that I was heralding in the Fourth Reich or something. And it's like, listen, dude, you got to relax.
So like if you crack a joke and everybody at the table laughs and the one dude clutches his pearls, you're like, all right.
Yeah, you can't. Um, I don't know. You have to be open to inviting in people and teaching them and carrying them along and mentoring them into being better players.
Yeah,
But some people you can identify are not worth the energy because they're not going to make it.
yeah,
Um, and I had that a little bit with the guy in question, and I did not put forth very much energy. I feel a little guilty about that sometimes because I'm a little bit of a nice guy myself, but
I would
ultimately
agree.
he wasn't going to make it. So I'm glad I didn't waste a lot of energy on him just to quit a week or two later than he actually did.
So there's a test that Jeffro likes to put his players through, and I think all three of us have gone through that. And I know Bob Stevens has as well, where, like, I mean, if the dice roll and he kills your character, he will kill your character, and he will not feel bad. Often he will think it's hilarious. But most times, if your character gets captured, he won't just have them die off stage. You will literally go to jail. So, like in your case, you got captured by the Giants. It was before I had decided that they were blinding all their captives. Bob also got captured by the same giants. I went to jail for certain disturbances of the peace that were trying to set up some pickpocketing because I was poor. Um, and our friend Goldenrod also found themselves in jail as well. And I feel like all three of us kind of bumped into the same thing. I don't know about Bob Stevens. You can tell us if your guy just served his time and got released or whatever. But when I came in, I felt like part of this whole downtime thing was that I was supposed to be working an angle to get myself released from jail. And Jeffro, you can weigh in on this. I don't think that was part of the plan at all. As far as you were like, no, you're just gonna sit there until you serve your time, right?
Well, and I think that's part of what's interesting about, like we were talking about, the dynamics at the table, where you have different DMs and you have different players and you have different expectations and you have
Yeah.
different DMs have different ways of introducing threads and managing threads, that can be jarring if you're not accustomed to them, that kind of thing. So, in that instance, Jeffro, as we're talking about it, I'm kind of realizing Jeffro does a lot of imprisonment type stuff when he's DMing,
Yeah.
um, and all of us handled it differently. Um,
I think it's a much more interesting choice than just killing the characters.
well,
Because even
sure,
the guys that got stuck to the flail snail shell, they wound up getting imprisoned, right?
it's always an opportunity, and it,
Yeah.
it turns it turns a shitty situation into something that you can leverage to do something else. What
Yeah.
Jeffro's looking for is patience. He wants you to have the patience to endure the pain of this thing until an opportunity presents itself. And
For
those
the
of
good of the
us,
situation at large.
right, and those of us who want to force a situation because we can't trust that to happen, um, we find ourselves in dire straits, as opposed to those who kind of endure it. They come out with a better sense of what happened. Um,
So what was your experience? Because yours was before mine, right? I don't know if it was long before or just only
I had
slightly
an
before.
assassin that XP capped in AD&D, so I could not gain any additional XP until
Yeah.
I leveled. There were no trainers in the town, so I was traveling to what
Did
was
you have
rumored
enough
to
money to
be.
level?
I was close, and I was going to. I was an assassin, so I was going to try to do some downtime assassination or spying
Yeah.
things in AD&D to gain that extra money to level. Um, I got captured on the road by trolls, and it wasn't immediately clear that they were trolls.
Were they wearing sombreros?
I don't remember. It wasn't immediately clear that they were trolls, and every hint that Jeffro gave me that, hey man, you really should just pump the brakes and let this happen, made me angrier, and I kept trying to do different things until it led into a violent altercation with a first level assassin and a bunch of trolls. So
Yeah.
that went as expected. I died, and
Yeah.
you
First
know
levels should not get main character syndrome.
no, it wasn't. It was the like we talked about. Um, it was trying to take action where no action was desired.
Yeah.
It was trying to do a thing where it's like, look, man, we're going to move on from this thing and get back to it later. Um,
Hmm.
and you poke the DM in the chest enough, and he's going to go, all right, let's see what happens.
You're certainly welcome to try.
Yeah. So that happened.
Yeah.
And it was a learning experience. And again, it comes down to um, table dynamic. It comes down to learning the people you're playing with and what the expectations are, and how the game flow is going to go, and those
Yeah.
kinds of things that are different per table. Even when you're all trying to play the same style of game, it's all going to be quite different.
Yeah. Well, because there's different like as a player, you can get totally in the head of your character to where you want just easy treasure and quick leveling and that kind of thing. And the DM is trying to keep the situation interesting for everybody, right? Let me see. I'm gonna catch up with Jeff Rose chat here. It says Brig was like, "It's a first level character. I don't care. Let him die. I'll just roll up another." I was shocked at the way he played.
I said that after the fact. I
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
I said that when I made the final decision that was probably going to get me killed. But at that point, I was trying. It was a big risk, big reward
Yeah.
situation. If it worked, I was going to feel like a superhero.
Yeah,
If
well, and
it
then you would be able
failed,
to go to level 2,
I
right?
was ruined. I was going to
Yeah.
die. So it. But it is what it is. But yeah, I absolutely said that. I was also pretty
90%
angry at
chance
the
of
time.
death,
So
but this
you know
character will be awesome if he pulls it off.
exactly
Yeah.
that was the calculus. If it happens, it's going to be the coolest thing that happened, and that was a risk I was willing to take.
And I think that is one thing that separates the really good players from the others is like, do you can you hold your character with an open hand and be like, you know what? I'm willing to take the risk because this would be legendary. And like they would talk about it for years. And if I shared this with my friends who also play, maybe they're conventional players, I could just see that look of jealousy in their eye where like, man, that's never happened in my game.
There's a careful balance there.
Yeah.
To Jeffro's point, just saying it's a first level character, I don't care. That's not the move,
Yeah.
because you're not really trying to win at that point. You're you're playing outside of role. Sometimes you're playing outside of the situation when you make that claim. So that's not the correct response to the thing. Um, but like to your point, if you do have a time invested character, and you make a similar type decision, a large risk, large reward situation, it's viewed in a different light
Yeah.
because it's you have time invested in this character, and if they don't make it, then that's a true hit to the campaign.
Well, you're starting off at level 1 again and like your eventuality of reaching name level has just the horizon just ran away from you a bit, right?
Well, sure, yeah. And any step backward is a step backward. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to take that, but sometimes you make that calculation and you think, well, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the thief that infiltrates the castle and tries to steal the king's scepter,
Yeah.
rather than pilfer a little bit of jewelry or a little bit of
Yeah.
silverware. He's making a bigger gamble, but if he gets away with it, he's the thief that stole the king's scepter.
That's right. That's
So
right.
it's kind of there's a cost analysis there. But if in that cost analysis you're saying, well, fuck it, it's a first level character, that's
Well,
not
that's
really
always
the
in the
way.
background, right? Like first level characters are free.
Well, yeah, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
If you roll up a character and you're playing the character, you need to play the character to win. You need to play the character because that character thinks he's going to win. He's going to do what he thinks he can do to survive and thrive in the world around him.
Yeah.
And you're not playing your role in any sense of the word role if you're suicidal. That
And
that
you have
doesn't.
taken that farther than anyone I've ever seen playing because I remember when Dornell was DMing and we were in that horrible dungeon with the orcs and you had 5 men at arms. Um, they must have been henchmen, right? Not hirelings, because
They were hirelings. They were
okay,
they were zero level heavy infantry.
okay. So we're only on the first level of the dungeon, right? And we come down, and I open a door, and there's just like 30 orcs, and I just shut the door immediately. I'm like, we gotta go. And there was like all these openings into the room where they're just peppering us with arrows, and one of your guys goes down, and like the whole party had evacuated the room at this point. You were the last one holding them off, and you sheathed your sword, and you picked up your level 0 heavy infantry henchman. No, not henchman, hireling. And you were like, nope, I'm going to make the strength check. I'm going to try and run out of here with this guy. Like, you did not leave your man behind. It was almost like a counterpoint to the thing that happened right before I joined Trilopulus, where a bunch of soldiers were wasted on the goblins, the warg riding goblins, like to the point where there weren't any more hirelings when we got back to town.
Yeah, yeah. So I have trouble. There's a detractor set. There's a group of detractors who I've seen this argument many times in our, particularly when the talk was around first level fighters and what makes fighters powerful in the older school games in AD&D or OD&D or Axe or things like that. Why is a fighter powerful? It's not in what he can personally bring to the table. A lot of times it's what he can hire and lead in
Yeah.
terms of armies. So during that time, we were exploring a lot of what we could do with hirelings and soldiers and men at arms and make things happen. And a lot of the detractors were bitching and griping and assuming that these were throwaway cannon fodder, and
Mm,
you'd throw them down in front of the orcs, and they get killed, and you'd run away, and you just hire more. And
yeah.
they're not understanding that there's
Not a
a
renewable resource.
well, renewable or not, they're not understanding that you have to play your role.
Yeah.
These are my men, these are my guys, these are the guys I go to battle with. So I'm not leaving one behind for something silly. If I can get him out, I'm going to get him out. um, and for playing my role, I got
Yes.
a big loyalty bonus to the rest of those hirelings, and they were able to see that I wasn't going to leave them behind and I wasn't going to treat them poorly. That wasn't on my mind at the time. You play your role, and the game will take care of you. You do what you're
And
supposed to do, and the game will cover you.
so I haven't finished, reading through first edition. I thought that was awesome when Dornell told you that like they saw you go back for him, because the guy, I mean, I don't a zero level guy drops to zero. I thought he was just dead. But you're like, nope, I'm getting him. And Dornell's like, you just got a huge loyalty bonus from your men because they saw that you were willing to risk your life to get that guy out of there. And I thought, hey, that's pretty sweet. I don't know if he was just following the rules or if he was being a good DM or both, but that made an impact on me. I'm like, this is how a good player plays.
Well,
They
you
are
you
in the
have
moment.
to
This
play your
is like
role.
the real role playing, right?
That fighter is a good aligned leader of men. He's got good
Mhm.
charisma. That's what his personality type is. He's going to try to make that happen. If he was an evil guy, if he had poor charisma, you know, if it was a different situation, I can't say that I wouldn't have left the guy behind. But for that character, there's no way I'm leaving a
Yeah.
man down. And even if he's dead, he gets a proper burial. Even if it's
Yeah.
a you just have to play your role.
I can't picture you playing an evil character. Like the closest is like Long Drag the Wizard, right? But I don't think I've ever seen you do a thief or an assassin.
It's funny you bring that up. I am a martial player by habit throughout
Yeah.
my entire D&D career. I prefer fighters and rangers and
Oh yeah.
barbarians and stuff like that.
Sever is amazing.
In Dubzeron, I have two thieves and an assassin. And I'm embarrassed to say that a lot of my success in that game is through douchebaggery, through stealing from the party and sneaking ahead and doing the things that thieves are supposed to do, because you have to play your role. If I'm playing the game, I'm playing the game as the role that I've chosen. I didn't choose that on I got bad stats, and
Yeah.
thief was what I could play to be successful. So okay, I'm playing a thief now, and I'm not happy with some of the outcomes as a person, but as a character, some of my thieves be counting, stacking them coins, man. They're
That's, that's
they're
right.
doing they're doing fine.
Well, I think
Um,
that's one of the big like for I'm trying to get a face to face group together to play first edition, and I think that's one of the difference points you have to explain right up front if someone's used to 5e where they have ultimate control of what character they want to build and play. And like first edition is like, no, you roll the dice and you see what you're born with, and then you pick a job you'd be good at based on what you can do.
yep.
And that coupled with a mud core low level high death rate, those two things work together to get you to play multiple classes you would never pick on your own, to learn more of how the game works, and like you really have to role play then when you don't get to make the character up, when you get to discover who he or she is. um there are some players that are just, I think of them for those evil characters. Bob Stevens assassins are hilarious with the bada bing sauce. He's like always trying to get always trying to get poison, and like especially when he was with, I think it was Paro was a ranger, and he was trying to pass himself off as a thief, and he was like, yeah, I'll check for traps, and he's like, looks good. because he didn't have those skills yet at level 1.
And those are the kinds of my assassin that was killed in Trellopolis. I worked up this whole thing with Jeffro. Hey, I'm going to play him like a fighter, and I'm going to get my assassin grades in downtime. But to the party, I'm going to be a fighter. And that we had this whole thing set up. It was cool. It was working well. But my own ego got in the way of really exploring what that character could do.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things, man. You got to play your role, even if it's evil, even if it's weird. Um, if it's skeevy, you got to be skeevy. It's a fun thing sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's. I prefer being heroic. I want to play in heroic games. I want to be the good guys.
I do want to point out Jeffro's comment. I like hearing about other people's horrible dungeons. I don't think Dornell's dungeon was horrible, but that situation really was for us.
It was frightening. There
Yeah.
was we were wildly outnumbered, and really outclassed. There really wasn't any winning that fight.
Another guy that just kills me with his evil characters is Renninger, Fluid the Druid's guy. Last night in Trellopolis, he's got a thief named Slippery Pete, but Slippery Pete didn't show up, right? What was it? It was Joe the fighter.
Joe the fighter, yeah.
And but he sounded like Slippery Pete when he spoke, and he like pulled out very unusual weapons that Slippery Pete had access to, and like after one point after a fight, you have a magic sword that can cast detect magic. And for people that don't know how that spell works, it basically shoots a beam straight forward, and anything that it intersects with its magical will start to glow. And so the way you use it is like you shoot the beam out, and then you kind of just rotate, over the duration of when the beam is emitted. You rotate around the room to see if anything's magical. And like, I can't stop laughing at this. Reninger's guy, like when you did that, like he just started walking around the room to stay behind you, so you couldn't hit him.
Yeah, he was.
So
he did a
hilarious.
pretty good job of keeping it under wraps. When he pulled out the laser pistol that we had gotten in a previous
Yeah.
adventure, that was kind of the giveaway. We would have never figured it out if he would have.
Well, he
He'd have tried to
disappeared for
stab
the
something.
whole fight. And then when it's time to count, find treasure and count it up, he just shows up going, "Hey guys, look, here's their treasure."
Yeah,
Got a bag of treasure.
yeah, and that's what's cool. I don't think Pete's actually evil. I think he's just a thief. Like
Okay.
he's just a thief doing thief things. Um,
I just like how sketchy he is. He cracks me up so bad.
yeah, he's really good at he's a very he's a boundary pushing player. So anytime you've got Renninger in the game,
Yeah.
he is going to do something weird. He's going to push something and
Yeah.
see how he can break this thing into some other situation, which is going to be entertaining. That was
Yeah.
kind of the story of that session. Ended up being he disguised himself as a different adventurer and
He
followed
had
us
a hat
into
of
the
he
dungeon.
had a hat of he a hat to let him disguise. I can't remember what it's called. Jeffro's got one too. His kid Leopold has one. And he just made himself look like a fighter, and I don't know what he was up to, and I don't know if we ever figured it out, but it was hilarious.
It's one of those things.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to get us too off topic
Yeah,
because
specifics and specific campaigns is we probably want to stay away from that because that's funny for us, but not so
yeah,
great for those who weren't involved.
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good um we were talking table dynamics. And so for my example, when I was in the jail, I was kind of flailing a little bit too, like how do I get myself out of this situation? And you were the one that kind of took me under your wing in my first couple weeks in Trilopulus. Like we'd play, everyone would log off, and then I'd stay on till like 1 a.m. You guys were so patient with me, explaining how things worked and that kind of stuff, and like calmed me down. And I felt like I just got welcomed in, and I just fit in really well there. And that's why it was weird to me to see like all of the resistance and the fighting on Twitter and stuff, because I was like, man, this is a great group of guys. They're answering my questions. They're coming around me. But then again, I came to this lately. I didn't grow up in this game, and so I didn't have any. I came as just the wide-eyed, humble learner, ready to absorb everything because I thought it was all hilarious and fun and awesome. Um, have you found yourself serving that role at other tables as well, where you see a new guy come in and you start to see some turbulence and you like just take them aside and kind of explain how things work?
Well, my personality type tends that way. In
Mm,
my professional life, I've been a trainer at all throughout my life. Wherever I'm at, I'm usually
right
the
on.
guy that's training on new employees. Um, and I think that's bled over into the game some,
Yeah.
where I do have a soft spot for the new guy. And again, to kind of point at the team sport mentality, when the new guy joins the team, you might fuck with them a little bit. There's a little bit of hazing, there's a little bit of an initiation process,
Yeah.
but ultimately you're going to help him get his plays down. You're going to help him get his technique down. You're going to help him be a good member of the team. Um, and it comes down to that alignment language. If you can identify that quickly, with people in different games that I've felt that way, I've reached out and helped tried to guide them, and
Hmm.
it's been successful. There are some members of those games who I have identified as maybe not worth the effort. Not as a human being. I'm sure they're great members of their family, and
Yeah.
they tithe at the church and they do all the shit they're supposed to do. But at the D&D table, they ain't my guy. So
That's
I,
fair.
I'm not going to put a lot of effort into somebody who I think is not going to make it. Um, so yeah, I've seen that at other tables. Yours, it was uh, yours, I think, was coolest of the recent exposure to that kind of thing, because um, you are so open, to trying to understand and trying to learn. Because some guys, they don't want to hear it. Just like I was, hey, I've been playing for 30 years. I've been playing for 20 years. I don't want to hear this advice. So it takes a different tack with some guys. Um, but you really had an open mind, and that makes it fun to do. That makes it where it's not a chore, like, hey, I got to drag this guy into this thing and beat him over the head with it.
Hmm.
It's just to make the session go, where it's a different thing, with guys like you who are genuinely curious and genuinely excited. Um, and when that happens, it's I'll do that every day.
Right on.
That's the fun part. That's what makes you feel good.
So what else about table dynamics? Like, because you play in a bunch of like, how is it different from table to table? And do you have like, have you developed certain cross cultural skills that allow you to adapt?
Well, I think a big thing is, I made a Twitter thread not too long ago, and I posted it on my blog, about what I feel like it takes to be successful as a player. And a lot of the language I used in there refers back to that team sport dynamic. And the reason I use that so often, um, is when Macros said it, it made me realize that that's how I've always kind of thought about it, and I didn't know how to express it. Uh,
Hmm.
and when he said, it was one of those epiphany moments, like, damn, he nailed it. He hit it on the head, and you take that and run with it. Um, and the that team dynamic is really what's most important. You have to, as a group of people, be able to, at least get along for long enough to achieve this objective of sitting down and playing the game. You don't have to be best friends, but you gotta do that. Um, with the different tables that I'm in, that dynamic is very different.
Yeah.
The DMs are different, the players are different. Players are much younger, or players are much older. Players are much more experienced, or they're newer at the game. Um, all walks of life, and that's part of the enjoyment, that I get out of it. Um, but like I mentioned with the Rift game, um, we went from like 3 or 4 players to 7 or 8 players to
Hmm.
like 15 or 16 players, because the
Wow.
DM's a fucking lunatic and just openly invites everybody off of Twitter to come join this game. And the DM is, JD Sauvage. He's a really good writer. Great dude. He's a veteran. Um, but in that situation, I took it upon myself to, organize everything and kind of I fell into that caller role of making sure everybody knew where to be, making sure that we knew what we were going to do for a session, because you can't sit down with 16 people at the beginning of a session and try to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You better know what you're doing before you get there. We had 8 in Trilopolis last night, and that was a lot. There was
Hmm.
a lot more went into getting started, and when you're on a time limit,
Yeah.
you got to get this thing going, man. You got to knock it out. So in that game, um, that was a very different dynamic. And even though I didn't have the skill set, like we were talking about tactically, that these guys did, they knew all the terminology that the
Hmm.
DM was using. They knew all the military stuff that was being inserted into the game. I had to learn as I was going, but that's not what I was there for. I was there to lead the team to make this thing happen, not to tactically get involved. I would let other people um, take that on, and I spent my energy, like Jeffro said, coaching up the newcomers, trying to understand one time, trying to understand. That, and we had a core of people who got it. We had a really good DM,
Hmm.
and we were able to be successful there. Um,
Did he
contrast,
burn out?
uh, I don't think so. He's starting it back up. He
Hmm.
got busy with work and holidays and stuff like that, so I don't
Yeah.
think it's been going right now. But he'll be starting it back up in February, early February. Um, so to contrast that, in Sojenka, which is DM'd by uh, Stephen Smith, uh,
Who's the man of 1,000 names, right?
man of a thousand names.
Purple Druid,
Yeah, he's
Wargaming.
his game. We've only got 3 players, and we are all on the same page basically all the time. We have one X Factor. He's a buddy of mine. He's a little bit crazy,
All
but
right.
we're basically on the same page basically all the time, and that dynamic is so different. Because if you talk about a team sport mentality, we're a guided missile in that game.
Yeah.
um, and it there's a very different tack on the game. Bellic is the other player of that triumvirate, um, and we plan in downtime. We When we hit the table, we know what we're doing, and we fire to execute.
Well,
We
because you're one
finished
of
sessions
two. You're one
earlier.
of two groups in that campaign, right?
That's correct. There's a group on Thursday, and they play a much different game. They play a different game than we do. They play
There's
a
the
little more
Thursday
conventionally.
group and the good group.
Well, I don't know about
I'm
all
just
that, but
kidding. I'm just kidding. Thursday
they play
players.
a
That's
little
easy.
more conventionally than we do, and I think that's evident in that we're very successful. We started the domain game very early because we were successful.
Yeah,
We end sessions when we have the bag. We'll end a session an hour and a half or 2 hours in because we check
because
the
you
box. We
achieve the
w-
objective.
we achieved the objective, and there's no reason to risk another problem. We
Yeah,
sign off, head to the house. So, and that happens with some regularity because we do so much planning and we do so much um, of the prep work that goes into the game from the player side. There's
yeah.
all
The
this
stuff
talk
from
about
page 107 of the player's handbook, right? Like how do you
right.
set up for success?
There's all the talk about no prep and zero prep and prep addicts and stuff from the DM side.
Yeah,
But the players have an obligation to play the game.
right
And if
on.
the players are not playing the game by preparing and being ready to go, you're wasting time at the table shopping. I don't
Yeah,
want to talk to an NPC shopkeep. I don't give a
ever.
shit haggling over the price of a suit of armor. I just don't. I don't care.
Don't you
That's
want
not.
Jeffro to do the voice?
No, that's it's not entertaining. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do that. So I want all that stuff done before the game starts.
Right on.
And when you get into the game, you can actually get to the objective. You're playing an objective based game, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. And the caller is the one who naturally feels that impetus and decides to try and whip a bunch of crazies into shape and get it going, right?
Well, you have to have a certain number of roles filled within the group. Um,
Yeah.
you have to have a caller, and it's more important the bigger the group, because the bigger the group, the more necessary it is to have organization.
Yeah.
Um, a smaller group, you don't always really need a caller because generally you're going to be more or less in the same direction. Um, but You got to have a caller. You got to have a mapper because you got to know where you're going. Whether it's over land, in a dungeon, whatever, you got to know where you're at.
Hmm.
You got to have a quartermaster because you got to have somebody keeping track of the torches, the food, the encumbrance. You
Yeah.
know, how many soldiers, how many things that we have going. Uh, and I like to have a term that I got from Axe is an analyst, but it's really a record keeper. It's a logger of what's
Hmm.
happening in the game, because I personally tend to my eyes kind of glaze over when lore stuff comes up.
Yeah.
But sometimes that lore stuff is important. It's
It
not.
is.
It's not a critique of the DM, and it's not a critique of what's happening. It's me personally. That's a failing of mine that I don't pay attention to that stuff.
But you need
Uh,
someone paying attention to the sign that says "Do not disturb
right.
the menagerie of Belboz the Magnificent." Right?
Exactly. You need somebody who knows the thing that's happening so that when you have to make a decision on it, the guy can raise his hand and say,
Yeah.
3 sessions ago, we got the clue here that says, hey, don't disturb the menagerie of Belboz the Magnificent or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need those roles, and guys can wear multiple hats. I often am caller and mapper, or I often am
Hmm.
caller and quartermaster, or I'm caller and analyst. Anybody who's played in a game with me, you've seen in Discord the big edited chat. It's a as
Yeah.
the game goes, it's just a live log of what's happening, so we can
Yep.
review it later if we need it.
And it helps the DM write session notes too.
Well,
Helps them
sure, yeah,
remember.
yeah, and it,
I,
it keeps everybody kind of um, on the same wavelength. You can be able to refer back to this information and be able to be successful.
I got an old Jeffro comment I want to address before it gets too stale. He says, "I think it's surprising that Dunder initially sucked at BROSR play, in spite of reading all the session reports." And to that, I say, it's one thing to sit on the couch and watch Survivor. It's another one to get cast on the show.
Yeah, and that's true. There's what does it say? Those who can't do teach.
Right
And
on.
like you can never learn um, without doing. Like you have to put your hands on it to
Yeah.
really know the thing. You could talk about it all day long, but until you try it, anybody listening to this who is curious or hasn't played or whatever, these are all great points. I'm a genius, and I'm gonna drop wisdom all over you,
Right
but
on.
none of it matters if you don't try it. If you don't take it to a table and make it happen, you're gonna fuck it up. It's gonna be clumsy. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be uncomfortable. Just like
Yeah.
anything new you try. Once you get the hang of it, you're gonna feel a lot better about yourself. It's like dancing. It's like guitar. It's
Hmm.
like video games. Anything you try, you're gonna really be terrible at first. Just
And that's what's so
keep going.
frustrating about the ankle biters is because they haven't done it. They just in their mind they think they know how it works, and then they come up with a reason why it wouldn't work, and then they dismiss it and argue from this just castle they've built in the clouds. And they're saying it to people who have experienced it, right?
Right, yeah, and the I don't know. I don't have any energy or words for the ankle biters. If somebody can come to me genuinely and talk about this stuff, awesome. If you're just gonna be a douche about it, get fucked.
Yeah.
I'll let Jeffro bite your head off. I'll let B Dubs quote tweet you all day. I'll let those guys who are those guys
You
beat
let
you up.
you let gelatinous Rube threaten your beard.
I don't get into beefs like that because I truly don't care. I really
Yeah.
don't. Hey man, if this isn't for you, fantastic. You do your thing. Leave me alone. I'm gonna run this game and I'm gonna talk about it and we're all gonna have a great time.
And I feel like players that take that on are so valuable to the DM. Like if you know you've got a caller who's just gonna make sure that not everything that gets shouted out is an actual instruction, um, or who knows well enough to keep the wizard and the monk in the second or third rank, um, it takes a load off of them too, and
Well,
you know that they're probably going to get farther into whatever they're exploring in the night, and
it's adorable that you still have the belief that the DM doesn't want to kill you. Um, Jeffro wants to kill you. B Dubs really wants to kill you. He is actively trying to. He is the most brutal DM He's going to kill you. He's got a
Okay.
session report he killed 11 characters in. Um, they they're trying to kill you. They say
Okay.
they're not, and you know, whatever. Fuck them. They're
Good to
trying to
know.
kill you, and you have to see it that way as a player, because you have to be ready for the situation that comes
Yeah.
up. The DM does not care if you get to room 6 in the dungeon. He doesn't care if you successfully burgle the caravan. He doesn't care if you kill the dragon. The DM of a BROSR game is just playing what's in front of him, just like
Yeah.
the players are.
Yeah.
The
Just like
difference
a
is
pantser novelist just watching things develop instead of
exactly the
running an
difference
outline.
is the players should be expected to the players should be expected to put forth the effort to win. It is the onus is on them to play properly and to achieve the objective. It comes down
Mhm.
to objective based gaming. You have to know that you're playing an objective based game and move forward from there. If you don't think you're doing that, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're gonna die, especially if your DM is Jeffro or B Dubs or one of the brutal DMs. I've played with really nice guys. I played in Red Frontier with Boldvay. I've played, with guys who are they're not trying to kill you. They will
Yeah.
kill you. You fuck around, you're gonna find out. But they're not the same level of brutal that some of these other guys are, particularly B Dubs. Dubsron is a wasteland of ripped up character sheets.
Okay.
It's a massacre.
So how does that dynamic impact the players in that
Uh,
campaign?
the weak-willed ones don't make it.
Okay.
They can't hack it. The really good players make it for quite a long time
Yeah.
until something happens, that game has been going consistently for years, 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure how long, but it's been uh, a really long time. Um, but the consistency that comes is from knowing that he's going to kill you,
Yeah.
and it if you don't know that when you sit down at that table, you're not going to make it. Like it's gonna.
So would you say Dubsrone is more prone to be mudcore than the other BroSR tables you're at?
No, because B Dubs doesn't care if you succeed. He doesn't
Yeah.
care if you. He doesn't. I joke saying he's trying to kill you.
Mhm.
What it really is he just doesn't give a shit. He truly doesn't care if you win or lose. He truly doesn't care what you think is cool or not
Yeah.
cool. If you can entertain him, you got a little bit of a leg up. It, you might get a scrap if you can if he'll laugh at whatever the thing is you're doing.
Okay.
Otherwise, he's just going to roll the dice and you're gonna die, or whatever. But the in that game we have had quite large scores historically, because guys were bold.
Yeah.
um, and guys like Robert Morgan, guys like Vassal Christ, guys like Jared Burrell, who does the music for the Grey Brotherhood and some of the new Acts 2 stuff.
Cool.
Um, these guys, Stephen from Sojenko, Stephen Smith, these players are exceptional,
Mhm.
and they were able to be quite exceptional for a long time in a game where the DM it feels like he's trying to kill you,
Yeah.
um, and
And
they
it
were
goes two ways though. Like I've heard on more than one occasion, when Jeffro's bad guys just cannot get a good roll, and you're just like, I hate it for you. I hate it for you,
yeah.
DM. Yeah.
Well, it comes down. I'm a second or third wave guy. I was not here at the beginning of it in like 2018 when
Mhm.
Mephrodis and those guys were starting out, and all the framing was about elite play. It was
Yeah.
about power gaming from a player perspective and bullying the DM and
Yeah. Bully
and
the
and
DM.
and making that the focus of the game. And over the years, we've kind of gotten away from that,
Hmm.
and it's been much more cerebral and it's been much more DM focused. And that's kind of why I'm trying to remind everyone that you can put forth the game that you want, but if
Yeah.
your players aren't playing the game that you think is in front of them, you're not going to have a successful time.
Jeffro says some players just die a lot. 10% of the players account for 80% of the deaths, and that's certainly true. I don't know how many dwarves of Todd's macho has killed. I think there was one session where he went through like three of them.
Yeah, and
Or,
that there's some truth to that. There's a guy in Dubsron. He's got. It's not that he's all his characters die, but he's got one character that's died and been revived like
uh,
a handful of times, a whole bunch of
does
times.
he start getting like dimmer, like a copy of a copy of a copy?
You would think so, but the guy's got a great sense of humor about it. When he
Yeah,
dies, he rolls up a new character. He doesn't trip out. He doesn't get upset. And
you
you
should just
have
name him
to
Duncan Idaho or something.
you have to know that you can die in the game, and you have to
Yeah.
know what happened and how to turn that around and how to make the next attempt better. And
Hmm.
he's one of the longer players in the game. He's got a domain of his own. So even with all those setbacks, he's still able to be successful in the game by persistence and learning from his mistakes.
Okay, I feel like Ryan is admitting to something here. He says, "I've only had one character last me more than one session."
So he must be one of those guys.
You kill three of one guy's characters one time, and nobody forgets it. That's right. Well, Vince says Brig loses a thief PC every other session. So,
I've never had a thief PC die. They lose them when I'm running off with the bag.
oh, okay. So that's the thing about a thief is you may stage certain events so that you
Just
can
because
get
they
away.
don't know where they are, don't mean
Yeah.
I lost them. I've had a bunch of fighters die because I'm always. You see how I play Sever. I'm a little more aggressive when I play fighters, and with a
Yeah.
DM that is trying to kill you, you're gonna die. It's just how it is.
Sever takes it personal, and he is just like, I'm gonna go flame that catapult, and if the fire giant manning it turns his eyes on me, then we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, I'll kill him too. Whatever.
Yeah, let's do this.
But back to table dynamics. The team sport mentality. You got to have your guys in the on the team know that they are on the team. Like they
Hmm.
have to know that they are playing the game with an objective, and they have to know
Yeah.
what their role is within the team. Just like if you're playing basketball, or just like if you're playing football, just like whatever. You have to know going into it that this is where you fit on this team. When I joined Trollopolis, I joined a bunch of very experienced players in a
Yeah.
campaign state that is rather advanced. But what I observed was there was a lot of chit chat, a little bit of loss of direction, a little bit of inefficiency. And I
Hmm.
took on a caller role, even though I was the new player at the table,
Yeah.
because I observed that that's where my role could benefit the group.
Did
I'm
they
not
uh did
I'm
they
not gonna
accept that
teach them
right off
anything
the
about.
bat? Like, did they fall in line, or how did that go?
I
When the new guy wants to
I
boss around.
don't really know. I never really talked to them about it. I just kinda
Okay.
did it, um, and the sessions got more efficient as it happened. I'm sure there were probably a little bit of friction there with, "Who's this new guy? Fuck you," you know?
Yeah.
I think more than that, they realized that they might need that personality type um, to make that go. You need somebody to drive, because if you just have a bunch of guys who want to hang out, or you just have a bunch of guys with dissenting opinions about what to do during the session, you're
Hmm.
losing valuable time. You're not able to
Yeah.
make the session happen. Um, and if you can't make the session happen with one time, you're always having to bounce back.
Yeah, and I think it depends too on the session. How much of a session do you get? Do you get 6 hours? Do you get 4 hours? Um,
Right.
so Brian's asking a question. I feel like you're kind of answering it. Ryan says, "How does a GM running an open table weekly find the right players? What are the attributes you're looking for in your fellow players?" And I don't think this is just a GM thing. I think the GM should be looking for those red flags of like, is this person fitting in? Does the group accept them or reject them?
Well, that's
Right?
what happens. I think I'm a little bit of a unique scenario in that I play a table game face to face.
Yeah.
and I also have online play. I have online patron players, and I
Hmm.
have online war game events within my campaign world that happen at one time at the same time as players are adventuring
Yeah.
over that same campaign state. So when you're recruiting players, what you have to, in the same way that you kind of have to let go of the reins during the game, you have to let go of the reins a little bit in recruitment. You really want your players to recruit more players
Mm.
because the players are going to recruit people that they already kind of get along with for in some capacity. And I think that translates pretty well online as because if I'm going to invite a guy to a game I'm already in, I got to know this guy a little bit right? Like I got to be able to speak the same alignment language at least a little to get on the same page with this guy and have him in the game. So
Yeah.
if you're bringing on new players, um, you have to know your limits as a game. You have to know I can handle 4 players. I can handle 6 players. I can
Yeah.
handle 8 players. I recommend starting small. My ideal group is actually 4 players. I don't want any
Okay.
more than 4 players as a DM or a player. Anything beyond that has a diminishing return on value to the party other
Okay.
than combat strength.
So,
Um,
like, if you were starting scratch, starting a face-to-face group scratch, you would say, prepare a town, prepare a dungeon, and maybe the hexes between the three of them, and then just invite 4 people that either showed interest or like, how do you know? Like, do you only just invite people that you already know are going to be good, or like?
well, this is the thing that's dependent upon system. If
Hmm.
you're going to play Axe, my table game is Axe. Dubsron is Axe. Axe is a fantastic system that fills in a lot of gaps where AD&D assumes that you're going to fill in for yourself. The DM is going to fill
Yeah.
in with some common sense kind of off the cuff rulings where um, Axe will set that out in plain language. Um, and you have to know the game you're playing. In Axe, you can't start with one hex and just expand from there
Yeah.
because the economy of Axe is what the game is built on. The limitations of Axe, the recruiting, the market availability, there so many of the mechanics of Axe are built off of the territory and how it interacts with itself.
Yeah.
So Macros talks about how to build for his world. It's not that difficult. You generate a map. You generate a fixed number of points of interest. There's X number of big towns, X number of little towns, X number
Hmm.
of tiny villages. That kind of thing. Um, in AD&D, it's a little more forgiving in that way, which is why I would absolutely start with one hex, one dungeon, one town. I'm not getting into developing a whole map because it doesn't matter. You don't need it.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, it depends on the game
Well,
you're
and
playing.
that
That's
frees you
that's
up
how I
to
would handle it.
build it ahead of player interest. The worst thing you can do is just build a bunch of crap that they don't care about.
Well, the way that Macros suggests that you do it is you build static points of interest that they can care about or not care about. It doesn't really matter. They're on the board, and if they're going to interact with one thing, then they should be tied together in some way, and you develop that as the game goes. There's a breadcrumb that leads from one point of interest to another, and
Yeah.
then you start to fill out that map to where they take the path that they choose to take, but everything kind of links together, and you're able to kind of have a game, and it's a great system, and I really like it. Um, but his recommendation is you prepare a sentence or two for each point of interest
Yeah.
until somebody shows interest in it and they start trying to pursue it,
Got
and
it.
then you develop it out. It's not a prep addict kind of thing where you're painstakingly developing a 6 level dungeon that nobody ever goes to.
Well, I'm interested in like the first things right now because I'm about to start one. Um I'm thinking about Trilopulus, and like there's just so many colorful, interesting things that seem to be part of the world. I don't know if they just I don't think Jeffro was no prep from the get-go. Um I think he's more of an appendix N guy, and then uses the no prep to follow player interest. Kara, I don't know if you dipped and came back. It turns out Brigadine here does a lot of training in new employee orientation. Um, she's unfiltered ID instructional designer, so you guys might have that in common. And also, in your face, B Dubs, I do have females that watch this show.
Got him.
Got him. Um, so the first session will probably the first few hours will probably be just getting to know each other and helping them make characters, right? I
You
feel like
have
character creation's a
Session
little easier
zero
now.
is fucking lame. It's not that hard to make a character. Sit down, make a character, do something. Don't don't sit there and talk about your backstory, because that's what it's going to turn into. If you're not
Yeah.
careful, they're going to turn into, oh well, I was, you know, I was born the son of a king, and I'm looking to
Yeah.
get my throne back. It's going to develop into that kind of shit, and that's not the game.
Yeah.
You know,
So
you're
would
gonna
you have
play
them
that
make characters
forward.
before they come, or would you say, all right, here's how you do it? Because like at least for first edition, like it is built into the game that the players are not supposed to read the DMG, and there you cannot create a character without bouncing back and forth between the two books, right? So it's almost built in that the DM will help you make your character. Um,
You really should show up to the game with a character in whatever game you're playing. I personally am not a fan of AD&D's format in how the rules are laid out and
yeah,
explained. I find it unnecessarily difficult to read. It was written by, you know, the dude that wrote it, and he was doing his best,
yeah,
and it looking at it in hindsight is different than considering what he wrote at the time that he wrote it. I'm not judging that. I just find it uh, difficult to parse sometimes,
yeah.
particularly during session play where you need a specific rule and you have to look at 3 different pages to find it.
That's right.
When you start to get system mastery of AD&D, it's absolutely magic. It is
Yeah.
it is beautiful. It really is a good game. You just have to put in the time to get the system mastery of it. Um,
Jeff says AD&D was written with a lot of cocaine.
the the big thing, you really have to show up to the game with a character.
Okay.
I don't want to waste time rolling characters at a session. I will if I have to, but you need, as a DM, you need to be have you need to have that, whatever tools that you can have. If you're gonna
Hmm.
write them in person, if you're gonna roll them in person, you need to have all the tools available. Make up a little, like a tutorial. Drew Bay, the
Yeah.
fit guy, wrote up an AD&D kind of Word document that aids new players in rolling a character. It tells you what steps to take, what pages to look at, um, and
Yeah,
it
you
and it
sent that to me and it really helped because I feel like the first couple times I tried, I left out huge steps and I just didn't know what I was doing.
exactly,
Um,
yeah. And because the game is formatted in such a way that it's very difficult to know that you're missing something.
mhm.
But as a DM, if you're going to start a new game, have the tools available to make that process as short as humanly possible,
Got
because
it.
you are wasting everyone's time by rolling characters at the table, unless you guys just want to hang out and drink beer and have a hangout time. But if you're there to play a session, play a session.
All right. So
Rolling
in your
characters
so
is not
your
playing.
your session 1, it's no session 0.
Session zero is dumb.
As Robert Stevens says, it's a communist gobbledygook. um Unfiltered ID says, does it have to be written or can you just make it up on the fly in your head? I wonder if that wouldn't be like a good chance to get people used to downtime one-to-one stuff by starting with, if you're going to invite someone in, just start DMing with them and saying, all right, here's what you need to do. Roll 3d6 times and choose the best number, and that's your strength.
And that could be a way, and it depends on how much time people have to engage in that in downtime. People with families and lives and jobs, and
Mhm.
that's a little difficult to do sometime, which some of the 1-1 DMs can talk about. To Unfiltered's point, um, you talk about writing a character, and that's something that is kind of a misconception from the newer school types of play, where you're
Yeah.
expected to write a backstory of how your character got to where you are. To Vince's point, your backstory is going to cost you a push up per word. Uh, you don't need a backstory because the story is what happens ahead of you.
Yeah.
If you're a fighter, I retired from the city guard. I'm going to find adventure. That's it.
Yeah.
You can do 12 push-ups and you're moving on. If
Well,
you're a
so
mage, I want a new spell book. Like it's very simple because your backstory doesn't matter. The story is
yeah.
ahead of you.
Well, but that is I think if I take a bunch of people that are used to playing 5e and invite them into this and say, "All right, roll up your own characters," I feel like a lot of them, the first thing they're going to want to do is write a backstory because and people can disagree with me on this, and I'm fine with that. But I feel like in fifth edition, you never again get as much agency as you have when you're creating the character. You write a level or you write a backstory and then you go on D&D Beyond and you choose all of your choices and then you hope that the DM reads your backstory and then like weaves it into the story that they want to tell you using your players. And so it's like for them that's an important key step because that's like the most impact they'll ever have on the campaign is before it starts.
Yep, and that's that. They have to just dip their toe in the water, and they have to just understand that nobody cares. Tell them ahead of time, I don't want a backstory. I
Yeah.
don't give a shit. I'm not I'm not going to read 3 pages of prose about where your character came from. I
Yeah.
and it's not to be mean.
Yeah.
It's stress the point that that is not necessary. You don't need to
Yes.
put in the work, just like I'm not going to read it because it doesn't matter to the game.
Yeah. Macho says, when the campaign matures, just saying, I'm a human fighter from Merkwell, the town that got nuked. And that says plenty.
Exactly. You know, the game state will develop around the game, and the people in games like Dubsron and Trollopolis and Sojenka and Red Frontier and Rift Bros and all these games where big events have happened and people have lived through them as players.
hmm
That's where the story is that comes out of there. You
Yeah. And
get
you don't have to get a TLDR sheet to get that value. Like everyone remembers those things happening and they talk about it.
you
And
need to
it's,
you need to stress the excitement of developing the story as the player group.
hmm
It's not the DM's story. I do not have a plot line for you. You guys have to play this game and
yeah.
develop the story, and we're all going to experience
So what do
it
you have?
together.
If you don't have a plot line, what do you have for them?
You have a consistent rule set that
Yeah.
you're going to use to adjudicate the actions in the game. You have a neutral perspective that the players are going to know that the DM is fair, the DM
hmm
is neutral, and he's going to allow us to do the things that we want to do that we think are fun. B Dubs won't even name his NPCs. When they happen, he says, "What do you guys?" We had a dwarven cave that looked like a late '90s Taco Bell because when he asked us what we thought it was, I said, "Of course, it's the Baja Blast dwarves," which of course was the Mountain Dew flavor that
Yep.
was popular in those late '90s Taco Bells with all the weird shapes. It looked like a Saved by the Bell episode. Um,
yeah.
but it doesn't matter. And yes, it's goofy, and yes, it's a little gonzo, but you remember that because that's what's fun. That the players are excited about the thing because they help develop it.
Yeah.
They
And
don't care about your plot line.
when the DM does not have the plot line, there's not that strain to try and square the circle of what the players want to do and what you're prepared for. And as the players, you don't feel like that you're somehow playing it wrong or doing it wrong if it's you're not going where he wants you to. I feel like it lifts a lot of the stuff that subconscious stuff that we were all struggling with before we couldn't put our fingers on. Just not having a story at all makes the game so much lighter and more fun.
Right. The story happens. You trip over a random encounter for an ancient red dragon that turns into the entire objective of the campaign, that you're going to find the equipment and levels and experiences to go kill the ancient red dragon. That was a random encounter that didn't matter. It was a throwaway thing,
Yeah.
but that kind of stuff matters. Um,
So if the game master, if the advice for them is rules mastery, book control is primary, and then just have a place, have some treasure, and have some stuff that's protecting that treasure. Um, let's get back into what does a good player do to prepare?
a good player needs to have some semblance of system mastery.
Hmm.
You accuse me of being the best player that you've played with.
Yeah.
I say that's bullshit, because Mandolph, um,
Well, yeah.
Chris is the best player I've played with, in that he has system mastery over AD&D, and he can manipulate those rules in such a way to make his characters uh, better than the sum of their parts.
I would
Um,
agree. Macho will think of things that are like second or third order derivations of the rules,
to
and
be
like,
fair to you, you've played with him as a DM more than you have as a player, so
yeah.
you haven't seen some of that.
I
But
got a taste of it though with Deadleaf, and when he was scouting ahead
Mhm.
and the surprise rules, and he pretty much took out a squad of 5 orcs all by himself with assassination rules before they could even acknowledge his presence.
Right, and the key, the point I have to make about that is, what makes a good player is a little bit of a subjective thing.
Hmm.
You need a combination of those guys, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started the broadcast. Um, I'm a straight man. I'm not charming. I'm not charismatic. I don't make jokes. I'm not funny. I'm not fun. I'm
I
I'm
wouldn't go
objective.
that far, bro.
I'm objective based.
I'm not fun.
I want to kill the damn thing. What's the thing in front of me that needs to die so I
Yeah.
can win? Um, I need players around me like Vince. I need players around me like Dunder Moose. I need guys that they have the charisma and the the personality to make it fun. B Dubs had a really good point. Um, had a really good point. I don't know if it was on your broadcast or not, but it was really salient, in that humor is what drives the game. If you're hanging
Mhm.
out with your bros and you're hanging out with the guys and you're having beers at the bar, you guys are laughing, and you're having a joke, and you guys are having a good time. When you're
Yeah.
playing the game, it's the same kind of thing, except you have an objective. At the bar, the objective is you're playing pool, or you're drinking beer, or that's the objective. At the game, your objective is to win the game. To Bellick's point, he plays in my Tuesday game, and we had this situation happen just this week, where the phrase "fun is a resource" um, comes into play a lot in that game, because we prepare and we put in so much effort uh, in the um, in the tracking of the game, and in the preparation of the game, that sometimes those things are not that fun,
Hmm.
where you're counting soldiers and spears and how much rations and how long it's going to take you to get to the thing. This is part of the game. The logistics are what matters
Yeah.
to an army, and D&D is a war game. Whether you like it or not, D&D is a war game.
Well, you had a tweet the other day, where you showed one of those giant American jets and I want to say it was like a Burger King food truck driving off
Yeah.
of it. You remember this?
Yep.
What was the point of that image?
So the point of that image is, amateurs think about tactics. Amateurs think about how I'm going to kill the thing in front of me.
Hmm.
Pros think about logistics. how am I gonna get my soldiers a Burger King in a
Yeah.
fucking desert? And when you got a C-130 rolling off a Burger King food truck, basically, into wherever the hell they're deployed, that's that's a professional level of I'm going to get these guys a taste of home because
Yeah.
they're 10,000 miles from where they're supposed to be. Um, and that's a joke way of saying something that we all kind of know is that logistics matter. If you try to go kill a thing but you don't have proper supply lines, if you don't have a forward operating base,
Mhm.
if you don't have the things you need to be successful,
Clean water.
you're
Yeah.
hoping that you're going to be successful. And a successful game session is not built on hope because B Dubs will crush your hope. Jeffro will crush your hope. You will
Yes, they will.
a DM with
You
a
will
bad.
commit suicide in a prison cell
It only takes one
because the
bad roll to
foxes are
crush
being hunted.
hope. It's what you
Yeah.
do after your hope's been crushed. How do you
Yeah.
fall back on? How do you fall back on your discipline of what you've enacted beforehand
Hmm.
to make this successful? And um, that's really what it takes to be successful. And I can give a bunch of specifics to different campaigns. We're running a little long, I think, so I don't
It's
want to waste
Friday
a lot of
night.
time
Nobody's
with
doing
stuff
anything else tonight.
that people don't they won't connect with because they won't understand the references. But um, for instance, if your mid-level party is going to go out far into the wilderness to tackle a dungeon that you know has several levels, that you know is a very tough place to be,
Mhm.
it would behoove you to set up your supply beforehand. Set up a safe place to retreat to that is
Yeah.
not all the way back to civilization. Invest in your own success. Build a forward operating base a hex or two away from where you want to be,
Yeah. Get some
and
wagons.
hire the security to guard that place because your mercs aren't going to go in the dungeon anyway, or they're
Yeah.
not going to go very far in the
They're not gonna
dungeon.
go past level 3, right?
So have your mercs to be your safe spot, and then you with the big swinging dicks, you go in the dungeon and you go do the heavy lifting. And then
Yeah.
when you need to come back and heal and get your spells back and drop off your loot and stuff like that, you can drop it there. You can set a henchman, a hireling to go get another wagon to carry all your gold. You can maintain all that stuff in downtime. But you have to think about the order of operation. You have to think about the
Yeah.
steps that it takes to be successful. It's not just show up, okay guys, what are we doing? Because
Yeah,
when you
because
do that,
you can have an amazing session and come out of there with a ton of loot, and all it takes is one bandit party hitting you when you're encumbered, when you're out of arrows, when you're out of spells, and then they can take all the stuff you just hauled out of there.
absolutely. And you
Yeah.
can't you can't rely on hope. Hope is what you have when you don't have anything else, but don't leave that to be the only thing you have.
Yeah.
And you have to have a place to put the Nagahide couch, which I still was able to steal from Billy.
All right. So, one of the things you and I kind of bantered back and forth about when the things that you have to share on. Tell me about how all of the stuff we've been talking about impacts tiers of play as a player. Because I
So
feel
this
like
is a
conventional guys never get past like the mud core grubbing in a dungeon stuff.
conventional guys never they don't even know that tiers of play exist
Hmm.
because the spotlight is on how much more powerful their singular character gets over the
Yeah.
course of a campaign. And they'll get up very high level and have very powerful magic items and they'll kill very powerful creatures. But that's not a different tier of play. They're still playing the adventurer tier of the
Yeah.
game. Um, Now, I'm going to frame this in the way that Macros talks about tiers of play in Axe. Axe stands for Adventurer, Conqueror, King. Um, Adventurer, you're the guy who goes in the dungeon and gets the stuff.
Yeah.
Conqueror, you've got a bunch of stuff, and you're using those resources that you've gotten out of those dungeons to hire men at arms to go establish your own territory and your own domain and your own strongholds. And then the kings are the guys who are managing those strongholds and either taking more from other kings or
Yeah.
defending against king level threats, those kinds of things.
And they're ordering the conquerors around, saying, "Hey, I need you and this guy to raise an army because we're going and we're marching on."
Right, they're
Yeah.
offering opportunities for those in the lower tiers. Hey, I don't have time to go do this. I have to worry about the big orc chief,
Yeah.
down the way. But if you go get this MacGuffin that is worth a lot of gold, I'll pay you for it, and then
Hmm.
I can hire more troops. Or I'll give you land where you can build your own castle, and then you can help me go fight the orc chief. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, the secret is that there are no tiers of play um, in practice.
Hmm.
There, the line is not the line is not fixed. It's not at level 1 to 4 you're an adventurer, and then level 5 to 9 you're a conqueror, and then
Yeah.
10 to. It's not fixed like that. It's much more fluid, and they cross each other a lot. Um, and where I've seen that the most is in Sojanka and Dubzaron,
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
where players who have no business being in what you would consider the higher level tiers, conqueror, king, that kind of thing, have been successful enough at the adventurer level to kind of buy their way in.
Yeah.
And so it's not a level thing, and it's not a hard and fast um, line of delineation. It's something that it's a it's almost like a meritocracy. It's a merit based system where if you can punch at that level, you get a seat at the table
Hmm.
if there's an event at that level. Um, and where that and actually the biggest example of that I have is in Oberholt, which is my campaign.
Yeah.
Um, One of the patrons does not punch on a military level. He's a wizard. He's a bit of a lunatic. He does not involve himself in marching armies around. I've had two different war game events where those kinds of things are happening with a whole bunch of troops and a whole bunch of big armies and sieges and stuff like that. And he comes out of the woodwork and inserts himself into those moments. And even though it's one of those things where he's at a different tier, he's playing in a different tier, and he's risking some to play that way,
Yeah.
but he's playing at a level where he probably shouldn't be, but he's able through crafty use of diplomacy and resources that are kind of outside of what a normal army would have. He's able to make an impact. Um, and that it's actually a patron player that Beat Ups plays for me.
Okay.
Um, and but the point is that I don't think we should focus so much on these hard set lines between levels of play.
Yeah.
I think that the players they need to understand that there are different levels of play, and they need to involve themselves as much as they are comfortable in whatever level they want to be involved in. And they can do it at very low level, like
Yeah.
Billy did in Trilopolis. He hired troops and got involved with the upper tier kind of war game thing that happened with the Battle Braunstein. Um, they can do it the same way that Tooch does in Oberholt. They can do it the same way that some of the guys in Dubsron. Vince notoriously has been
Yeah.
involved in basically everything, and he's got a waste management company with like 10 dudes or whatever. Um, so
It's got
he's
some
he's
gong farmers.
yeah, it's a different thing, but he's been able to navigate that environment in such a way that he's built himself his own domain. He's built
Hmm.
himself his own army. He's built himself the own things that he's able to do because he's playing across tiers. And that's
Yeah.
kind of my point is that you don't want to see a discussion about, okay, these armies are marching, and you immediately go, oh well, that's not for me, I'm not high enough level or whatever. Your thought process should be, how can I capitalize on this?
Yeah.
Am I a fighter that can sign on with the army and lead some troops and get some experience that way? Am I a thief that can raid the war chest of one side or the other? Am I a mage that can get some magic items from? How can I capitalize on this? Don't
Yeah.
run from the adventure. This is an adventure game. Don't hide from the things that are going on around you. lean into them.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for.
You're not playing bankers. You need to put your life on the line for those big moments.
Right, and Jeffro had a really good point about when he introduced the idea of the Battle Bronstein, about the status quo of patron play and the status quo of high
Yeah.
level play, where it's very easy for high level characters to establish themselves and then maintain their own sphere of influence, and they don't really butt heads with anybody.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to poke them in the eye and say, "Hey, something's happening." Um,
Mhm.
and I've
Rile
seen
them up
that.
against each other.
I've seen that in Overholt. I'm fortunate that my guys. I forced one instance in September that went very well. And then right now I'm actually running one as we speak, um, where they've instigated it on their own.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so two rival paladins of different religions are chasing down a third patron of a fire giant. Um, and they chose it on their own. One of them threw the gauntlet down and said, "You a bitch! You can't kill this fire giant before I do." And then the other guy, naturally responds. So they're making this thing happen on their own.
Nice. Yeah.
And that kind of initiative from your players at whatever level they are, if they're patrons or PCs or whatever tier they're in, um,
Hmm.
that's what drives the game.
So as I'm learning about this stuff and trying to think about it, it seems to me that the players tend to enforce equilibrium on the game state, and it's sometimes up to the DM whether they use a battle Bronstein or some new plot or whatever to overthrow the apple cart and see how the players will respond. But from what you're saying, it sounds like your players are the ones that are like, all right, well, we're not going to sit behind our borders. We're gonna stir some stuff up, and we're going to be the ones to um, add chaos into the mix as far as the where things have settled.
It comes
So
back to table dynamic. You
yeah,
can't you can't always control the type of player that you're going to have.
hmm
You can't say I'm only going to have the kind of player that's going to have initiative and he's going to take the action, and that's not a reality. You can't that's just not how it is.
yeah,
So sometimes you have to force the issue. Sometimes you have to flip the table. Sometimes you have to make the thing happen, which is what I did in September and what Jeffro did in Trollopolis and what that has happened. B-Dubs did not too long ago with I think he called it the Fishstein,
yeah.
which is based around a town called Fishton
I
in
need to
Dubs
talk
Run.
to him about that when I get a chance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Sometimes you have to make it happen. Um,
Yeah,
but sometimes you're fortunate enough where your players make it happen. I think the assumed state of the game from the AD&D perspective was that it was going to happen naturally.
yeah,
Um, and that guys, I think really, if you consider the wars in history, it's about resources, it's about offenses. If everybody's nice and they're all getting along, they're not going to piss each other off or they're going to kill each other. If they
yeah,
don't have to fight over resources, like recruiting new peasants to run their domain, or an iron mine or a gold mine or something, like if they don't have to fight over some sort of resource, then they're not going to clash. There's not a reason
yeah.
for them to fight each other if there's not something that they have to fight over.
Did
Uh,
you see when John McGowan went on Black Lodge Games recently?
I did not. I didn't
Okay,
catch
one
that.
of the interesting things he said talking about his book was that um, domain play is a natural consequence of encumbrance rules. That if nobody's paying attention to encumbrance, if you can carry a dragon horde on your back, you never have an incentive to put down roots, to build a stronghold, to have a place that you can stage those kind of sorties you were talking about. Like it's exactly what you said. It's the resources that provide the impetus for the big world changing wars and battles and things that happen.
That's a really great point, particularly in AD&D, where it specifically says that if you can get your treasure back to civilization or to a stronghold, so if you
Yeah.
have a forward operating base or if you have a stronghold of your own, you get your XP right then. You don't have to get it back to the main
Oh,
town or something like that.
nice. Yeah. It's like a home base, a zone. It's like
Exactly.
you gotta get in the end zone.
You
Uh,
you touch base.
Jeffro says in 2021 we didn't make anything happen because we thought one-to-one time and total player autonomy was just going to make everything happen because everything was just spontaneously organically going.
Right, and what I've found is that if you introduce player factions like patrons and stuff like that, um, you've got to be able to put some kind of objectives in there, because if you let them
Yeah.
go on their own, sometimes alignment will solve itself. In Dubseron, I'm sorry to say that I've killed quite a number of evil patrons as Drakon, um, which uh, in the role that I was playing had to happen. I personally am disappointed that those players are no longer in the game, because
Yeah.
some of the guys, the DM of Brobenloft, I always say his name wrong, uh, but Kess, Moonshot of the Mists on Twitter, um, he played Froggo. He was amazing. Arbor Thrill from the Axe Discord played Lizard King. He was amazing. Eric, um, I forget his Twitter handle at the moment. Um, he played a Castus, the Vampire Lord, which is amazing. They were
Hmm.
really good players, and they added a lot to the campaign state. Um, Vince was even a villain for a while. I converted him by force, but uh, those Ferrigno was one of the OG evil
Yeah.
patrons.
That
Um,
was how he started Mandolph. He started Macho
yep.
Mandolph in Trilopolis and Ferrigno in Dubzerone.
Not John Dacre played
Oh man,
Darren the Florida Man Mage.
that's the
There's been really cool players in Dubsron, but because of the contention from alignment, and one side had to go. I fortunately was lucky enough to come out the victor, but um, those guys are really great players, and
yeah,
I want to play with them, and that's kind of where I developed that sense of I want to be in everybody's game. I want to. I play in Sojenka on Tuesday. I play in Dubser on a Wednesday. I play on Trilopolis on Thursday. I played in the Rift Brothers game. I played in Red Frontier. I want to play in Vomitron's game. um, I want there are games
yeah.
out there that I want to be a part of because I want to play with these dudes. I really like their games, and I really like what I read about them, and I really like what they do. And I
It's
want to
something
see them
about
within
playing
the
with
dynamic.
people that you just learn. You learn from playing with them. Uh, like one of the things you did early on when I can't even remember what session it was. You stabbed one of the bad guys we were fighting, and you were like, I fling the blood off my sword into the eyes of the next one. Like that was there was so much flavor there. I loved it. And there is just a thrill being around players like that that are just creative and taking it serious and doing things you hadn't thought of. I've not played anything like it. I'm hooked. And
It,
part of it is the rules, and part of it is the level and class of player that responds to these principles of gaming.
Absolutely, they have to be willing to learn, and you have to be willing to teach.
Yeah,
And the you have to play the game by the rules. None of this shit matters if you can carry a dragon horde on your back, like you said.
yeah,
Um, none of this shit matters if you don't have to prepare for a game. If as long as you hit your mark in the DM's plot point, you're going to catch your next level and get your next magic item and show up for the next session. Whatever, nobody cares.
yeah,
It just doesn't matter. When there's risk involved, then the rewards actually matter. What you earn actually counts.
hmm
And that's the I don't know. That's what matters if you're going to play the game to win the game. You're not, and I say win. It's not a football game. You're not going to get a score, and there's not time. A BROSR game never ends.
yeah,
Much to my chagrin, because I've made some mistakes in developing my game. I'd like to correct them. I'd like to start over, but the game doesn't end. There's no
yeah.
starting over. There's no. You just you just go forward.
It is shared between more than just your mind, and even if you are the DM, you don't have that much control over it.
Right. You are a referee as the DM.
Mhm.
You're not some god figure. You're simply adjudicating what happens.
Yeah.
And the faster you realize that, the faster the game is going to be successful. Um, but really, as the DM, as a neutral arbiter of the game's only going to be as successful as your players.
Yeah.
And the players have to come to the table with the understanding that it is a team sport. There's a lot of talk about playing your role and different alignments and things like that. I personally prefer for contention in regards to inter-party kind of PvP stuff. I prefer that to happen in downtime.
Yeah.
um, when the session starts, you've made an agreement that we're going to pursue the objective that we have in front of us, whatever we've agreed to pursue. If the opportunity presents itself, as the thief, you pick a pocket. As the mage, you take a spell book. As
Yeah.
as the evil cleric, you raise some skeleton and send it off somewhere. You do whatever the thing it is that you have to do to play your role. But
So, would you
the
say playing the
primary
role is
objective.
more important than doing things to advance your own character?
Well, they're one and the same, but I think playing the role within the team is more important than playing the role
Yeah.
individually. And I think sometimes that I get some pushback from the purists, the traditionalists in that way.
Hmm.
But I think when you agree to the 4 hour session time and you
Yeah.
sit down to an objective, you need to pursue that objective. There's enough that you can do in one time in downtime to really flesh out the fact that you are a skeevy thief or an evil cleric or a or a,
Yeah.
a, a mage or whatever the thing is that you do.
Simp for those roles, those grades that you get from the DM, right?
Right, you have the opportunity to make those things happen, um, and you have to take the small opportunities, but you can't derail the game because you're gonna die on a hill about something that is important to just your character,
Yeah.
because you should have had a conversation before the game about what the objective is. And if everybody agreed to the objective, you can't derail the game when it's happening because, oh man, we got to go do this thing. Bruh, we talked about the objective. What the fuck are we doing? Like,
Right. So, maybe can I ask for some feedback then on how you think I played Bumblebore last night in Machador? Because from one point of view, I really screwed it up, but from another, I feel like I really represented what a wizard should do on the team.
okay, well, tell me how you think you screwed it up and how you felt like you didn't, and maybe I can just kind of see what your perspective is.
Okay. So, Bumblebore, I haven't played with you guys in a while, so I was behind as far as sessions and stuff. So this was his first outing in a while. He is experience locked, meaning that he has enough XP to level up from level 3 to 4, but he does not have enough money to pay for the training. I have a wizard that can train me, so it's not going to cost extra. I don't have to train myself, but I'm just gold piece poor. And we got into a battle. There were two frost giants, and you guys handled them. And then we were being charged by some ogres. So like 9 ogres, and I was like, what can I do against 9 ogres? And I realized I had a spell of a 5th level called it was a scroll. It was a spell scroll of Wall of Iron. And so I was like, part of me wanted to save that for later because when I was high enough level, I could write that into my spell book and learn it, and then we'd always have it. But the other part was like, I'm not really contributing anything right now, and so I decided to just use it to stop the charge. And we had a lot of fun figuring out the rules of that. I put it up behind the front row of ogres, and because it wasn't supported, the back row or the second row knocked into it and squished 2 ogres flat, horribly wounded another one. I think I got 4 out of the 9 between that and other things I did. So from one point, I'm like, well, that was a good use of that spell in the moment. It stopped their charge, it broke their momentum, and it did things. But as far as from my character's point of view, what good does killing a bunch of ogres do if I can't get any more XP for it? I probably could have sold that scroll for the money that I need to level up, you know? So, like, as far as like advancing Bumblebore, like his personal power, I feel like I squandered an opportunity. But from the standpoint, and obviously, I feel like we had enough muscle that you guys could have probably taken those ogres without the interference from the wizard. Like you were about to carve into them. So I'm not sure if I flubbed that or if I did what I was supposed to do as a wizard member of the party, is use what resources I had to preserve your hit points, to save you guys from taking damage, and to upend the battle. So that's kind of where I'm figuring out.
So ultimately the grading system is subjective to the DM's opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm not the DM of that session, but I
Well,
can
he's
give
in the
you
chat still. Or Macho, you can weigh in too if you want.
so I can give you what I consider um, uh, whatever input that I can give as an additional player. Um, the the thing that's important is, were we at risk of casualty from 9 ogres
Yeah,
charging us?
I think.
So it's possible that even though we're powerful and even though we're tough, somebody could have gone down.
Yeah.
Um, and you chose to use a spell at your disposal to assist in that encounter. I don't think that gets you a bad grade for using a magical resource to achieve a goal. That's
Okay.
actually what you should be doing. I don't think it would have given you a bad grade if you held on to the scroll because of the things you just talked about. However, I think it might have given you a bad grade if you sold that scroll
Hmm.
to get the gold. Um, because the grading system in AD&D is a little weird, and like I said, it's a bit subjective. But I think in my mind, a mage or a magic user is primarily concerned with acquiring and hoarding magical knowledge and
Yeah.
magical power. Um, to that point, Chuck had a relatively powerful scroll from very early on in Jeffro's
Hmm.
game. Chuck the magic user. Uh, I had Fireball on there. I had some other things on there that were
Woo.
pretty powerful, and I never used them because I was holding them so that I could learn them when I got to the appropriate level.
Yeah.
I was not going to squander that resource unless in a drastic emergency. Um, Whereas the wand of missiles that I had, I used that every time I could. I blew everything I fucking
That was
you
your
know.
6 gun.
Yeah, I was six shooting that thing all over the place. But those scrolls, it was gonna take a some kind of emergency for me to use those.
Yeah.
In my mind, I don't think that causes a poor grade because I'm hoarding magical knowledge for when I can use it to best effect. But again, it's subjective. Maybe the DM would have thought differently, and maybe he would have graded me differently. Um,
Well, let's
it's
hear
just one
from
of
the
those
peanut
things.
gallery. Jeffro says Bumblebore sounds like a Dumble Dope. Robert would have given me the E grade. Macho, who is the DM for that session, says you only get so many chances to steal the limelight and do something flashy. I give it thumbs up. Uh, Jeffro says, man, selling the scroll instead of using it should result in magic users getting graded down. And he says Chuck is now top wizard. So
Yeah, and and it's good that they see it the same way. But again, it comes back to Appendix N and what are the roles designed to do? They're designed to push you in a direction to play what you're supposed to play within
yeah,
a party, and it comes back to the team mentality. You're supposed to hoard magical power so that when it's your time, you suck at early level as a magic user.
yep,
You're garbage. People are putting you in their backpack and carrying you around a dungeon because you're not doing anything.
yeah,
But when you get higher level, because you hoarded the resources, because you were smart about where you used the things that needed to be used or where you saved them when you didn't have to use them, when you get to higher level, bam, now all that teamwork that you guys put in early pays off. And now you
yeah,
have an extremely powerful member of the team with all the right spells. With all the he lived through having a D4 hit points.
yeah.
He
Well,
got there.
the thing that sucks doubly bad about being a low level wizard is if you find yourself in a party with level 6 guys, the kind of foes that they take on, your sleep spell is not going to touch them. They've got too many hit dice to even feel. You won't even make them yawn.
Yeah, sleep is a low
So
level spell. It's not going to make a dent that way, but you
yeah,
can't
like if
control
it was
that.
all level ones, well, I mean, I used sleep to pretty much gain my biggest asset right now, which is Malfoy. I put the Drake to sleep, and then he became my familiar. So, um, yeah, I feel like I don't feel like I've played Bumbledore as a complete Dumbledope, but I'm also kind of like I don't get to play as often lately, and I was like I'm gonna have a session like Macho was saying. I'm gonna figure out this stinking Iron Wall spell because it was actually pretty hilarious, all the stuff that we figured out about that plan.
My
So
biggest advice to you and
yeah.
anybody who's playing fresh or they can't play all the time or whatever, do shit. Don't overthink it. Don't
Yeah.
do stuff. You're going to catch a bad grade sometimes because you're going to do something wrong. You're going to do something that outside your role that you thought was cool and the DM thinks differently. Don't bitch
Hmm.
at the DM. Don't have a 20 fucking page argument with him on Discord about how your role should have been better. Just
Yeah,
take your L
that's
and go
right.
back to the drawing board and come
It's
back next
feedback.
time. And
Learn
and
from the
it's
game. Yeah.
exactly learn from your experience. It's just like anything else you do. You fuck up a chord on guitar, you don't lose your mind.
Yeah.
You know, you just keep playing. You just learn it. You just go on. You fuck up a step in the dance. You don't punch the girl in the face and leave. Like you work through it.
Right
So
on.
it's no different than any other activity you do in life. Um, you take your wins, you take your losses.
Yeah.
Um, ultimately, if you put forth the effort, you're gonna achieve the goal.
Jeffro says, I got so tired of player conferences, and this show needs more dance analogies.
I'm not a
Um,
dancer, but I know Jeffrey would appreciate but
yeah.
it is a valuable learned skill, and
Yeah.
just like anything else you're doing, um, if you don't know the step, if you don't know the finger placement, if you don't know whatever it is about the thing you're doing, you're going to mess it up, but you're going
Yeah.
to learn it. You're going to try. You're going to continue. You're going to get back on the bike. You're going to get back on the horse. You just have to try. You just have to go.
All
Don't get
right.
discouraged.
So it's like I always do this. I thought it was going to be like an hour, and it's 2 hours, and it feels like 10 minutes has gone by. I knew this was going to be a fun one. I still wanted to talk to you about Kriegspiel, but um, you guys did one. You and Steven and Belloc, the Nabrolionics. So maybe we'll just table that topic until I can get all of you guys to come on and talk about that if they're all cool with it. Um, but yeah, I want to thank you for your extra time. You're probably like, okay, I'm gonna get on this show for an hour, and then like here I've talked about your whole Friday night with you. Um, what do you have like a parting summation or a final thought that you want to leave the viewers with, especially for people that might be trapped in the conventional play and just starting to dabble with these ideas?
Let go of your ego. The primary thing that will interfere with you growing as a player or a DM or a patron or whatever, growing in this hobby
Yeah.
is your ego of what you think the game is supposed to be. Let go of that and learn different play styles and talk to different people and learn from those people who can show you the receipts of
Hmm.
how the game works the way that they're explaining it. There are guys out here who say they've played for 40 years and can't back any of that up other than, well, it should be this way. There are guys out there that say they played for 40 years and can show you blogs that have it for quite a long time. There are guys out there who just started playing and are just trying to figure it out. You can learn something from everyone. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a fight every time you talk about D&D. You can
Isn't that
have
the
a
truth?
conversation. You just have to be able to let go of the ego.
That's
You
right. And
just have to be able to have that conversation.
you can let somebody say something that you disagree with. You don't have to
Absolutely.
correct them, right?
Yep.
Because you might, you can even consider what they have to say without ceding absolute victory to them forever, right? You can just say, I want to hear what these guys have to say. Maybe they're full of it. Maybe they got something right. And it doesn't matter if they're rude. Don't worry about how they're saying it. Worry about the exact statements and truth claims they're making and weigh those on their own merits.
You have to have genuine inquisitiveness to be able to get to that point. You
Yeah.
have to truly want to learn. Most of the guys that ankle bite at the front facing BROSR guys are, they don't want to learn. They just trip over these guys who are saying bombastic things and posting wrestling memes and bodybuilder memes and telling you that you suck at D&D.
Yeah.
Um, they take that personally and they want to fight about it and whatever. And it's not, those guys aren't, they're not part of the conversation. It doesn't really matter, and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what they go and do at their table, in the small term. The pessimistic side and the larger overarching thing is the hobby will eventually be ruined by um, by a belief that you don't have to follow the rules, and
Yeah.
by a persistence of developers and writers who put out new systems to insist that you don't have to follow these rules. You can do whatever you want as long as you have fun. Just buy my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Buy my stuff, but don't actually read it or do what it says because you
right.
can do whatever you want.
Why would I buy 3 books, a player's guide and a DM's guide and a monster manual of a system, and then ignore a bunch of the shit in it?
Yeah.
It's a waste of my money. It's a waste of the writer's time. It's disrespectful of the game that's put forth. If I play the game as the rules are written and I don't enjoy the game, that's one thing. If I disregard v- large parts of the game because I don't understand them, or I don't feel like reading the book, or I
Yeah.
don't like them or whatever, I'm not playing that game. And then if I don't continue to play that game and if I don't speak to the value of that game, then I've done a disservice to that game because I haven't really played that game. And I
Yeah.
think that's why Axe and AD&D are the quintessential games for the type of uh, games that we want to play. They're the quintessential systems because they put their money where their mouth is. These are the rules. These are the things you should be doing.
Yeah.
And as long as you follow those rules, you don't have any problems. It's when you deviate from those things and when you try to house rule stuff and you try to get outside the bounds where, okay, great, you might be having a good time, but you're not playing that game. And what you'll find out is that a lot of times those games just don't last.
Yeah.
Sometimes magic happens, and sometimes you guys play for 40 years and it's one group, and that's awesome, man. And I'm really glad that happens for people. Um, but most of the time, that's not what happens. The play group falls apart. They go find someone else to play with that does the same thing, and it's just a never-ending cycle. And
Yeah.
it's a that's a that's a negative view of the hobby that I don't really like, um, and I don't talk about that much. I really would rather talk about what's good
Yeah.
and and push what's good and show these guys that's what's good and invite them and play with them and mentor them and that's what's important, and that's part of the reason I'm in so many games is I want to see the new guys. I want to see the old guys. I want everyone to see how well this works
Yeah.
and put their own spin on it and take it home with them and do that kind of stuff.
And if you're thrilled doing what you're doing, like if it's just checking all the boxes for you, you do not need our permission to have fun your way, right? Keep doing what you're doing. But if you are like Brig and I were, and Jeffro and others, and like you just feel this amorphous dissatisfaction with conventional play, um, don't just surf your cognitive dissonance. Give it an open shot and try it out and see if this doesn't become your favorite way to do the game.
Talk to us. Talk to us in good faith.
Yeah. Don't just
Discuss
set
with
us up for
us.
Duncan.
Ask us real questions about what's don't get caught up in you're playing D&D wrong. Understand that you're playing D&D differently, probably not by the rules of what is
Yeah.
actually written in the rules, specifically 5th edition, because there are so many rules in those books that you are not reading and you are not playing and you are not playing the game that you think you're playing. You're fucking around. And that's fine. You can fuck around. That's great. But talk to us, ask questions, ask how can I get better? How do you
Hmm.
guys do this? Read the session reports, take what you can out of it, and you can take that back to your own table and you'll all be better for it.
Brigadine, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on here. We were going to try to bring this to you guys earlier, but his throat was all tore up and stuff. So, and good thing too, because you had no idea I was going to make you go for like 2 hours and 20 minutes. But thanks for being on the show. Thanks everyone for joining us. If you want to get more Brigadine, here is his the blogger for his campaign, brigadungeon.blogspot.com. You can follow him on Twitter or x.com under Dracon Invictus with a K. And anything else they should be doing to follow up on you, men?
I think I sent you a link for the how to win as a player.
Yeah, let
It's a
me.
specific entry on my blog. That would be the if you're interested in trying to advance your player group, that would be an interesting thing I think
Yeah,
for people to read.
I'm gonna actually copy of this and paste in the chat. I'll leave it up on the bottom of the screen here too, but I'll put it in the live comments so you guys get this as a link. Definitely go through and read that. And you did the whole thing that made me want to do this in the first place is you had a good thread on Twitter as well about how to win as a player.
Well, that
So
is just that thread put over on my blog, so it's the same information, um, and it
right on.
it's the thing that I think is what's most important from a player perspective.
Thank you so much, my brother. Have a good night, everybody.